Hello, yes, hi. This video is my interpretation of the currently trending hashtag draw this in your style, and this piece that I made was inspired by some socks that I have. I was working on I would say like a normal draw this in your style. I took two of my favorite illustrators and I was drawing their characters, and then I had like eureka, and I was like, why don't I do draw this in your style but like famous paintings? So that's what I'm doing. So in this video I did the Gustav Klimt's The Kiss, which is a very famous painting, and I also have the socks of it, but I'm not going to show that because it's a little weird. And just a little disclaimer, I am not a professional artist, so I don't really think I have had enough time or experience to make or develop my own style in the traditional sense. I think that I do have specific periods, if you will, of pieces that you would look at and say, oh, Leela did that, but the process that I use to make this piece is a process that I use to make a lot of the pieces, or all of the pieces in my AP art portfolio. It's very process oriented, and I kind of have my own system for that. So in that sense, I do think that this is one of my styles, but it's not like my definitive style. I think as an artist that's developing, it's important to remember that you don't have to have a style, and it's important to keep experimenting and trying things out. So that's all that I have to say about that. I really like the way that this turned out. This is the first finished art piece that I will be posting on my channel ever. I really enjoyed doing it. If other people like it, then I maybe will do more. But yeah, this is my interpretation of the Draw This in Your Style Challenge famous paintings version. There's a word and I'm forgetting it, but the famous paintings one. I'm doing famous paintings. So yeah. And okay, so let's just dive right into it. So I started out by doing some sketches in my sketchbook the night before, trying to kind of get the composition down and figure out what other elements I wanted to add, what things I wanted to keep, what things I wanted to take away. So I kind of decided on keeping and maintaining a warm color palette, but kind of not making the whole thing and the overall color be gold, because that's kind of one of the main focal things about the original painting. So I started by getting this cutout of kind of the general shape of the main subject, and it just so I was trying to put it behind the collage pieces or the cutouts, just so that I could like layer them on top, but that wasn't working. So what I normally do for this is I cut out collage pieces that I like, and then I'll start arranging them on the page. And so for this one I have a variety of different things, but one of the things that I would say is not necessarily part of my style but might be in the future, just because it's something that I really like, is floral elements. I really love flowers, and they're very consistent throughout my AP art portfolio, and they've been consistent ever since with my collages and stuff like that. I really like using them to cover things up. For example, I don't really like having humanistic or anthropomorphic, I don't know what the word is, but I don't like having human forms and things like that. So I covered up the lizard's eye because I felt like that could be distracting. There's actually the picture that's on the bottom. It's kind of pale, so you can't really see it, but that's actually a picture of the ocean and some waves, and there's a boy surfing on it, and I wanted to make sure to cover him up. And later on in the piece I actually cover up the zebra's head, because I think it's really important with collage. Obviously when you're using magazines you can't control every single element, but there are certain things that I like to keep and things I like to take away, because I want to be very careful in where I put the viewer, because this piece isn't about the lizard, it's not about the zebra, it's about the main subject matter, so I don't ever want to take away from what the main subject matter is. On that note, that's also why I went in and I ripped up some textured fabric pictures from a fashion magazine and added those into the background as a darker color, just so that they It adds this like movement and this kind of background noise to the main subject matter. And at this point it looks like a big jumbled mess, and that's because it kind of is, but I have some other steps that I do in this process to kind of bring things forward that I want to bring forward and push things back that I want to push back, to really like bring attention to the points that I want to focus on. Another thing with this piece is I am doing the draw this in your style, or create this, I don't know, paint this in your style. So I wanted to have some nods to, or like acknowledgements of, the original piece. And one of those main ones was that I did want to also keep some gold elements while not making the whole entire general color gold. So what I did to kind of bring that gold back in was the man's covering, his shawl, if you will, has this gold pattern of like rectangles and squares, and it's very like linear but also sporadic. So I wanted to bring that back in and also bring the gold back in with these two pattern pieces of paper that I had. And what I did was I just like cut them into strips and then put them on a piece of pink paper, which I had already cut to the size and the shape that I wanted, and then just layered them over top and then cut the shape back out again, so that way they follow that smooth curve without me having to like cut each individual piece. It just makes my life a little bit easier. So I went in and I added not the full jacket, but I did a top part and a bottom part. It'll be more visible later on. And then I also went in with another gold thing to kind of bring back in that color again. The overall color of this, like I said, I wanted it to be warm, so the gold would work. For example, if I did silver, it would be a little bit different. Gold and silver tend to clash. Gold is more of a warm tone color and silver is more cool tone, so that's some color stuff, I don't know. And I actually had to press this piece a few times because things tend to warp when you use water with them. These aren't like professional pieces of paper, they're magazine cutouts, so they do warp when I use liquid glue. That's why I tend to use glue sticks with it, and use as little liquid glue as possible until like the very, very end, just so that my paper doesn't end up like coming off the page. So part of my second step in making the background more of a background and the foreground more of the foreground is I go in with this watercolor wash over the magazines, and luckily this is like a kind of cheap chalky watercolor, so it kind of just lays on top of it. It's what I used for my AP art portfolio. It just works brilliantly on this. I don't even know, I don't know how professional watercolors would work, but this one works beautifully for my purposes. So I use a mixture of purple, red, magenta, and even brown in the background to make it more dark and go back further. And I also use some orange on the foreground with that wave picture to make it stand out more and bring it to the foreground, and blend it in with the warmer tones of like those flowers that I wanted to be like the main focal points. And then another thing, First step is having like textured and not defined images in the background. Second step is watercolors. And then the third thing that I do is I add this clear gesso, and this stuff is what is key. It was key during my AP art portfolio. It's key now, 4 years later. It just gives this effect that I absolutely love 100%. The original reason why I started using it was because I wanted to find a way to incorporate colored pencils on top of the collages, and normal magazine paper is so slick that you can't use normal colored pencil, like Prisma colored pencils, on top of them. It just kind of like dents the pages in the shapes you want, but it doesn't actually transfer the color. So this gesso, through many trial and error, I found that 3 layers works best for me. But basically what it does is it gives this texture to the paper, which is amazing. So it gives it like a little bit of a sandpapery texture. So it's not the most optimal for colored pencil, but it works, and that's all that matters right now. And originally I used to go in with like 6 layers. I think the first piece I did, I had like 6 layers of this stuff, and it got so thick that now, 4 years later, it's kind of peeling off because of like heat and time and all that stuff. So 3 layers I would say is like the best. 2 layers fine, but the reason why I do 3 is because it's just that extra oomph of like, it adds this like filmy, grainy effect and kind of blurs things together, so the background becomes more uniform and it looks more like one thing instead of like multiple pieces. Another thing that I did also was I rip pages instead of cutting them, because the ripped makes it look like they all meld together versus a cut line is very uniform and straight, and it kind of is jagged and not so appealing. So that's my little tip, I guess. I don't know. This isn't a tutorial. I just kind of want to explain what I'm doing because it might be a little bit like, whoa, what's she doing there? It's not so cut and dry as watercolors. You just paper watercolors, but this is like magazines, watercolor, acrylic paint, gesso, colored pencil, like almost all the things you can think of. So at this point, I start kind of cutting out and figuring out what I want the main focal point to be, which is the two people that give this original painting its title, The Kiss. And this is kind of a new thing. I didn't really do this before when I did these style of paintings or pieces, and I don't normally include full human bodies with faces, but because this is a draw this in your style, like I wanted to, make it look like the original painting while also making it look like my own style. But this yellow color that I use for skin tone, I think, is seen a lot more recently in some of my other illustrations, and I really like it. I think it's a little bit deeper and more personal in that I don't like defining my subject matter's race, which is kind of why I covered up the faces before, but this is just kind of, I think, my new way of doing it. But I've used this yellow pastel color in a lot of my recent illustrations with people, and I just like the racial ambiguity that it gives to the subject without painting them like a crazy color. Like yellow is still kind of in the realm of a skin tone, but it's not a natural skin tone, versus if I painted them green or blue, that's very like synonymous with aliens and extraterrestrial life. So I really like it. I enjoy it. I like that it doesn't define the subject matter, or they're like, it just allows I think the person to just view it as like, that's a person, if that makes sense. This is kind of where I was like struggling a little bit with the piece. I was trying to figure out whether or not I wanted that gold stripe paper to be in the background or not. And then I found out that I had like accidentally cut the people to a different shape than the actual jacket was already. So I had to like go back in and add some more of those rectangles. So this is me just adding in some more of that shawl cover jacket thing with the gold. And I really like the way that this turned out. I think it perfectly like complements the old painting, but also is not like it at all. The old painting actually has some black within the jacket, and I didn't really want to do that. I liked keeping this light and fluffy color-wise, I guess. And then also too, originally I had this blue vellum just as kind of like the dark blue kind of see-through almost piece. I originally wasn't going to keep it in the final painting, but because I had used the purples and almost a little blue tone in the background, it looked really nice when I put it on top, and so I wanted to keep it. I just thought it looked good. It made the subject matter pop while also showing some of the collage texture underneath. I had added a flower by her rear end, and I wanted to make sure that that showed through because I think it just accentuates that area and brings the viewer's eye to it a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't covering up things that I had already worked on. And then I just had to like kind of start glue sticking them together. Glue sticks are key because you can also, not only do they dry the things you are gluing together flat onto each other, but if you make a mistake, you can also easily take it up. So I always glue stick things first, and then I'll go in with liquid glue and give like small touches because I don't like the rippled effect that it gives. It can really just ruin something, I think. I might, maybe Mod Podge is the way, I don't know. But I had to press it again and then wait a little bit. And then this is my absolute favorite part. So now at this point, we color it in with colored pencil. I'm so excited. I just need to document it. I'm so excited. I just like, so good. Okay. So I just love when I get to go in with the colored pencil because that means that like it's almost being done. But at the beginning you saw me add in another quick layer of that gesso on top of the gold just to make it like dull down a little bit, and so that I could also draw the draw with colored pencil on top of it. And you can't really see a lot of this colored pencil work at the beginning on camera. It kind of shows through a little bit later, but the whole point is not to like add in extra things. It's just kind of like to create small details, because I like that these are the types of pieces that if you look at it from far away, you can see it and appreciate it for the composition or like the main subject matter or whatever. But then when you get closer, you can see other things, and that's what I like that about these. Like the collaging, you can't really see what's going on where, but then you get closer and you're like, oh wow, that's, you know, a hand or something. I don't know. I like that. So the color pencil is not really it's not meant to stand out, even though it would maybe look nice if it did, but I just didn't want to take away from the main focal point, which with these bright yellow people on top of this like darker purple warm tones, it just would have maybe taken away from it. But also in the original painting, they're kind of kneeling on this bed of flowers, so I did want to kind of bring back in some of that texture and the floral elements. Flowers are another thing that's kind of persistent not only in my collages but also in my actual like drawings and stuff. I did a mural at my mom's work of all flowers, and I absolutely love that. And yeah, I really like, I have fun drawing these types of flowers, and I have fun looking at flowers. It just makes me so happy. So I like flowers. That's all that I have to say about lamb. But another thing that also is part of my, I would say, a theme that's consistent throughout my pieces is a circle. I like incorporating circles around people and their heads. I think it's kind of like, I haven't quite figured out why, but it is very heavily inspired by a lot of the iconography icons in some really early artworks. I'm not sure what time period, I'm not going to try, but it is really heavily inspired by that for whatever reason, and I like the way that it brings forward the people and their faces and all that stuff. So one of the last things that I did was I went in with some colored pencil on top of the acrylic paints to bring in some details to the people and their faces. Originally I was going to kind of make it a little bit creepy and that the man was like overpowering the woman, but then I just thought that was too much, so I didn't. But I like that you can kind of see that she's like, he's squeezing her face a little bit. And then the hair gave me a little bit of trouble. I went in with like 5 different layers of colored pencil and different colors because I just couldn't get the right color. I don't know, the right shade. But I eventually went in with this darker umber, and it just made it darker. Also blue made it the color that I wanted. And normally I do these pieces on paper, so one of my final steps is cropping it so that the actual composition is the way I want it to be. But because this was a canvas, I made special note to myself to like not do that until the very end. So that's why I folded over those pages. And I think that doing that at the very end allows you to kind of bring the piece all together. And having things going off the page, that's kind of, I would say, not composition 101, but something that's very important in any art piece, is having things going off the page makes things visually interesting. So making sure that I had things going off the page in all 4 directions, because I've done pieces in the past where I forgot to do that when I worked on a canvas with this method, and it just didn't look so great. So there you can kind of see the final florals and the final piece. I really enjoyed doing this, and I really liked the way it turned out. And yeah, so that's my Draw This in Your Style famous paintings version. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure you subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Like this video if you want me to do more, or comment, because I enjoyed doing this, and I think, I don't know, I like my process, and I miss doing it, so I want to do more. I hope you enjoyed this video whenever and wherever you are. You will see me or my hands in the next video, and I'll see you. Yeah, okay. Okay, bye.